invite. I've been seeing what you guys have been doing with the community, and I think that DC is actually one of the most vibrant, interesting places, better than New York City. Ooh, who here's from New York? Who here's from New York?
I'm moving there.
Everyone's leaving.
Boo! Ship out the hipsters, go back to Brooklyn, right? So I think DC, to me, is actually one of the most vibrant, interesting places for photography. And, you know, big shouts to the community here, because I feel like it's such a dynamic place to shoot street photography, especially in today's changing political and economic times. And very underserved. And I mean, like, and this is just me as a Californian coming from the Bay Area. Like, you don't get the amount of, like, racial diversity, of the political diversity, the socio-economic diversity, and also, you know, what Tom and Chrissy has done with the arts community here. So I know that they do a lot of photo workshops for the kids. So even one thing I'd encourage all you guys to do is see how you could volunteer your time to share your passion for photography, because, like, you know, I know some of these kids, art is really kind of the savior of all of us. I know for myself, I treat photography and street photography kind of like personal therapy. Anyone else feel like, you know, you don't go out shooting some photos?
Will and John. Yeah.
Huh?
Will and John.
Yeah, and then so Will's the boss here. So you want to give us a landscape of the photo project and the folks here?
Wasn't expecting that. Hello, everyone.
1, 2, 3. Hi, Will.
Hello. Welcome to Digital Creation Studios. We are 2 months old. What we do is provide education for children and the underprivileged and those who want to learn. Kind of the idea behind the space is when people like myself were younger, I didn't really have a place to go or anyone to learn from, so I just kind of had to do it on my own. So kind of what this environment is a place where you can go and practice on all the equipment that you can only dream of and learn all the things you can only imagine, and just kind of do those things instead of just thinking about it and wondering how. So this is kind of the gallery area where all the magic happens visually. Photos, video study, photography, whatever the case may be, special effects. And in the back is our video production, music recording room, where we do sound, voiceovers, things of that nature, teach the kids how to use all of the standard industry standard equipment that they could use to get into the field and study. I'm not really good at talking, so any other questions?
Oh, John, give an intro to yourself.
We've got to give props to Will, who really was the force.
Yeah.
You get credit too, I'm afraid.
Right. So we kind of had a short period of time to transform this place into what you see it now. There was 3 of us. Myself, John, and there's a man behind the curtain that you don't see, who's really the magic behind it all. Conscience, DMC, he's a Grammy artist from Washington, D.C., does a lot of work with the youth and children. Very, very involved with the community. So he can hear me, but you can't see him. But he's back there right now working on some projects as well. But yeah, we spent a lot of nights in this place to make it all possible. So love to have you, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, if you know people who are interested in this, who might be interested, if you know kids, especially in this neighborhood, there's a schedule and some propaganda, project.
Correct. We teach classes every day. We teach classes every day but Sunday. Every day but Sunday. We have classes here for anyone who's willing to come in.
For free.
At the price of free.
Yeah.
Free 99?
Free
99. My hero price.
Half price of that.
Dinner is included.
Yeah, John.
And dinner is included.
Wow. Oh. John, you should treat yourself too, man.
There's the wizard.
Wizard.
Yeah. There's the wizard.
Wizard.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you, Grammy artist, State Department representative, world-renowned musician, my friend, my brother, the man that makes all of my magic happen. Conscious DMC, please.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say. Hope that you guys enjoy the space, and thank you for bringing your energy and your energy and all that great stuff. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, you should introduce yourself in the space.
Hello, everyone.
What's your name?
John.
1, 2, 3. Hi, John.
Yes, which is Hebrew, by the way.
Yeah.
I am a art boss for now. I do everything. Started with Project Great 5 years ago as a summer youth employee with Sasha Bruce, doing design work for the big bus in downtown. And they were thinking about making a purple line for Southeast, and we wanted them to go to Frederick Douglass House, the greatest part of Southeast, and go to all the known schools such as Big Bed, Ballou, and Anacostia, which is great places to go. I learned a lot of things. I became a Renaissance man.
Yeah.
I'm only 23.
Oh, yeah. Michael Jordan year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, now, LeBron.
Oh, LeBron. LeWho? LeWho?
LeBron. Yeah. But yeah, I'm a Renaissance man. I do everything possible now. So yeah, that's my brief introduction of myself.
And then I have a personal question is, what do you get most out of Project Create?
What I get out of it?
Personally.
Personally, the art therapy out of it, to express yourself and not just feel clustered and thinking to yourself and your lone thoughts. I have a lot of those. So yes, Project Great helped me a lot with art therapy, understanding that my community and being aware of some things I wasn't aware of, learning new traits and skills that I thought I would never dabble into, and helped me improve my thinking strategy and my horizons to my future.
Right. Yeah. All right. So I know we had this awesome critique prepared, so I'm not going to steal too much of your guys' time. But I just wanted to just do a quick talk on just street photography, life, philosophy, marketing, branding. If y'all have any questions, I'd love to share the secrets.
Before you go into that, I just want to see how many people have images they would like to show this evening. Have a jump drive on them. 1, 2, 3. You can hold your. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Was there 9? Okay. 8. All right.
All right, sweet.
Yeah,
All right. So I think what I've discovered through my street photography journey. So quick intro to myself. My name's Eric. Hi, Eric. Asian tourist, often wanders around with camera, sometimes mistaken for Kaiman Wang. And essentially my passion for street photography happened because I was always passionate about teaching and sociology. So to me, the way I treat street photography, it's kind of like applied sociology on the streets. And also for myself, like, this is such a funny thing to say, I love people. And I feel that every time you take a photo of somebody, you're actually blowing them a kiss. That's the way I treat it, because you as a photographer, you determine what you find beautiful or not beautiful. And so every time you photograph people, you're actually acknowledging that you find some sort of inner beauty about them. Like, even though some lady, like there's one photo I shot of a lady in New York City, she's like laughing. She was like 75 years old, like dressed to the nines, so beautiful. And I saw that beauty in her. Now some people might say, oh, you know, I'm old, you know, I'm past my heyday, I'm not beautiful anymore. But for me to make a photo of her was acknowledging her inner beauty. And I think that's my driving philosophy behind street photography, is that I'm trying to uncover the beauty of every single day life. And also, I'm a big fan of open source information, so I know that we've talked a lot in the past, is that when I started street photography, I'm 31 now, and I started when I was like 18, so I started in like 2000, maybe 6, and there wasn't really any information on how to shoot street photography, and it was kind of like, the street photography game at the time, it was very like insular, very closed in terms like no one wanted to give away the secret sauce, right? And for me, I'm like, how did he make that photo? How did he get that photo without getting punched in the face? Like, how do I shoot with a flash and stuff like that? And for me, I started this blog, and actually, shout out to Cindy. I was like, man, Cindy, there's no blogs on the internet which show you how to shoot street photography. And she said, why don't you start one? I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm like this like 20-year-old kid. And she's like, yeah, maybe you could just start a blog and use that as a way to share your life journey. And 8 years later, you know, I'm still alive, so I'm still kicking. So I would actually encourage all of you guys, I know most of you guys are active on Instagram. I'm a big proponent of blogging. Big proponent of blogging.
Sorry.
All right, that'll be 5,000 Instagram followers, please. All right. All right. All right, y'all can keep looking at my beautiful face. I'll continue. So, actually, for all of you guys, I would highly recommend everyone here. As anyone else faced the Instagram, Facebook outage that one day? You're like, oh my God, 24 hours without Facebook, Instagram. So I'd really encourage all you guys to start your own personal websites, your own personal blogs, and also your own personal YouTube channel. So raise your hand if you have a YouTube channel. Raise your hand if you have a Gmail account or a Google account. All right. So if you have a Google Gmail account, you already have a YouTube channel essentially. All you got to start doing is uploading videos to your YouTube account from your phone or your desktop, whatever. And I've actually personally found that I think the next frontier of photography is probably going to be video. It could be super simple, like shooting video snapshots. Like, this digital camera thing, a lot of them actually have this video function. So I've actually been shooting videos a lot on my phone, on my camera. And I treat it kind of like moving video street photography. It's like for example, we're walking through the mall, and there's like a nice shade of light that's like kind of blinking. There's also an elevator shooting. And essentially imagine me shooting like a Snapchat, right? Like I record it for about 10 seconds, and I compile all these videos, upload to YouTube. Or also using iMovie to make a slideshow of your images, because like nowadays a lot of people don't like to sit down and click through the photos. And also I've been using GarageBand to make my own beats for fun, so uploading to YouTube. And I personally find that that's one of the best ways to get discovered. I know it's the way that people recognize me, because like even though I've written about like 5,000 blog posts on my blog, whenever I meet people, they don't say, "Oh Eric, I like your blog." They say, "Eric, I love your YouTube channel." Or like some people are like, "I can recognize that voice from anywhere." I'm like, what? Like that's like a little bit weird, right? But it's really a great way for you to put yourself out there and to share. And also one thing I think that's really important in street photography is that not to let yourself become pigeonholed or boxed in. So I would actually recommend, instead of calling yourself a photographer or street photographer, to really brand and market yourself as visual artists. And it's a concept that I learned from one of my friends in Kyoto, and it's useful for two reasons. First and foremost, you could sell yourself for more money if you're a visual artist, not just a photographer or street photographer. And the second reason is that I see a lot of you guys, some of you guys are working with glass, some of you guys are working with sculpture and other forms of art. And so I think all of us are artists, and rather than just think of ourselves as artists, because sometimes that can come off as a little bit too pretentious, as a visual artist. Because, raise your hand if you like paintings or drawings or cartoons, anime, whatever it may be. So I think that we could really cross-pollinate all of our different artistic interests and apply that to our photography. And so now, for me, I treat street photography almost like walking therapy. Like, raise your hand if you have a stressful job or a stressful life. Raise your hand if you get email. All right, cool. So for me, just being able to walk around the block and shoot street photography is a huge mental release for me. I know that I'm still personally learning a lot, and actually the biggest tip I have in photography and street photography is just to never stop shooting, really. I mean, it sounds so trite and so obvious, but I know for myself, like, my dream was, I want to have a solo exhibition, I want to get a camera and get sponsored and da-da-da-da, and then I achieved all these totems of success, and I still, it didn't feel that nagging emptiness in my soul. And I'm like, what is it that I'm lacking? And actually, I became trapped by success in the sense that, Eric Kim, he's a guy who shoots super close with the flash, and he shoots with the Leica, and people started to keep boxing me in. And I actually became less motivated in my photography because I'm like, I just need to I'm like Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell, he can never do another serious thing in his life because they've typecasted him as Anchorman. So I kind of felt like that was my Will Ferrell moment in photography, is that I'm this caricature and I must follow it or else people are going to be disappointed in me. So once again, I think us as photographers, street photographer, visual artists, the goal is this constant improvement. I'm a big fan of this Japanese notion of Kaizen. Have you guys heard of it? K-A-I-Z-E-N. So Zen, and then Kai, K-A-I. It just means gradual improvement. So think of Toyota Camry. It's been around for 30 years, and every year, it doesn't get that much better, but it gets a little bit better. Same thing with the iPhone. like the first iPhone was like revolutionary, but since then it's like everything, it's like a little bit of a gradual improvement. So I feel like if you're a better photographer today than you were last year, you're on the right path. And I hope that I live to be 120 years old in excellent health, or at least upload my brain to Google's cloud services and do some Black Mirror episode. But really, I encourage all of us to continue learning as a community. Thank you so much for having me and hosting me. And yeah, afterwards, if y'all have any questions, I could answer any questions, give you advice about, you know, like with photography, marketing, branding, or street photography, anything like that. Or, you know, if you just want to join my K-pop boy band, I'm here. All right, thanks a lot, guys. The whole triangle, you want to see the whole, it's like the whole thing. But then if you're not able to see all of it, you feel like very visually frustrated because you cannot have it completed. One thing that I like about the composition, I kind of like these two black elements here. And I kind of follow this like Zen philosophy. It's like, if it's not essential, it's best to eliminate it. So obviously you can't go back in time and reshoot it, but if you see a similar situation in the future, just get closer and either shoot this like kind of a horizontal framing or like yay, or just try to get really, really close and just film it like this. Because I do actually recommend, like, I'm not telling you to crop it like this, but I'm saying, if like this is for all of us too, right? If we see similar situations where it's not really about the architecture, but it's more about the people and the movement, I think this would be a wise idea. I actually really liked...
Can I just say one more thing about that picture? I mean, I think that there are a lot of successful elements, and I agree with you, like maybe cropping, but also like 4 is kind of a weird number in that composition.
Well, there's 5.
There's 5. No, but that fifth person's kissing, like they're...
Right,
yeah,
you know, but I in terms of like how the people are located, like it's not smooth for me, like I don't like it. I know that it's just in the spur of the moment and I really love the different elements. It's just like I wish they were in different, located at different places, or maybe there was another person walking, you know?
Something happening like in the foreground or something like that, I think could help.
Yeah, it's something happening in the foreground. Another concept I wanted to share is, are you guys familiar with this concept of figure to ground?
Mm-hmm.
So figure to ground, what's figure to ground?
Well, you want some type of contrast between the subject and the background?
Yeah, so this is a fun, if you want to sound pretentious at art gallery, figure to ground. Essentially, it's a fancy word for contrast, but to me, it's actually more interesting than contrast because figure means the subject, you know, the figure, ground is the background, and essentially, you just want enough separation. And this is one test I recommend. You could do this in Photoshop or any other tool. So under blur, there's something called Gaussian blur. I think there was a German scientist named Gauss. So he made this Gaussian blur, right? I don't know what it's called. So what you just do is that you just apply a blur to it. And if you can kind of tell what's going on, it's a good photo. If you can't really tell what's going on, it means that it's difficult for the eye to decipher what's going on. So for example, looking at this shot, right? So after we add the Gaussian blur, what are the points of interest we see? Is it like what are we looking at?
There's 3 elements.
So we can see that thing,
3 figures.
The lights?
that thing, you see the lights. And this is also the tricky thing is that generally your eyes are drawn to the areas of the highest contrast. So what's the area of the highest contrast here?
2 light spots.
The 2 light spots here, right? But what does the photographer or the artist want us to look at?
The subjects.
Yeah, so that's why the idea of just eliminating the distractions is kind of a cogent idea. So now at least here there's better contrast between the blacks and the whites. And even if I wanted to further abstract this notion, imagine if I just took the eyedrop tool and I just drew these as marquee tools. I think this is just a good way for us to think about. This is why I actually like to study a lot of abstract art. It's just a better way of us to just understand our images and to hopefully make compositions which kind of pop out to us more. So even sometimes I like to look at my photographs like this and imagining if this was just a monochromatic image like this. And then disappearing, oops, sorry. anyways, the basic idea is that whenever you're thinking about your photographs, a simple test instead of doing all these crazy things is actually just taking off your glasses. So if you go back to the original image.
So this is like when we used to squint.
Yeah, so two things you could do. For the people with bad eyes in the room, you could just take off your glasses. Or what you could do is you could cover up one eye and just kind of squint. And then this is the figurative ground test. Also, this is why I think it's good to judge compositions as small thumbnails. This is also called the small thumbnail test. Is when you're looking at your photos as small thumbnails, if you get a good sense of what's going on, then it's strong. Actually, the second photo I want to discuss is this one. I think this photo has a lot of promise, and it's very DC. What do you think is interesting? What do you think could use improvement?
Well, the guy on the right, or our right. I mean, if he like took like 2 more, like 3 more steps forward, it'd be like much better.
3 more steps forward?
Yeah.
I think he's in the
spot.
yeah,
He's the perfect spot.
He's fine.
He's the best.
The contrast is perfect.
He's in the perfect spot.
What's that?
Nice
What's that word
aesthetic.
you learned? Mirror to around? Figure to ground, yeah.
He's in the perfect spot. And he's outside of the stride.
And he's got the Q-tips in his ears.
Yeah, he's in the perfect spot.
Yeah.
It's for the future.
I like the corners of the stairs, you know, like it's white on one side and sort of shadowed on the other. I like the way that.
Oh, this corner here?
No, the how those stairs come straight down. That.
Yeah.
That's
right,
like.
yeah, no, go all the way down. Yeah. Like on the right side it's shadowed, white side, left side is white.
That's actually like very close to the one I exhibited last Sunday, right? So,
Yeah. So one tip, and I think when we're giving critiques, so one thing that I know has helped me is that like building your critique feedback vocabulary, your visual vocabulary. So one concept I learned from just like painting is called rhythm, right? So, or like beats, like anyone here like music, right? So it's kind of like having, so you see the black, white, so it's like, imagine if you're listening to music, it's like, dum, 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 dum. So, like looking at a photo, it's kind of nice because it's almost like piano keys, so you kind of have a nice rhythm there. Also what I like is visually, my eyes are kind of led around here, and then to me this guy is really nice, and then it kind of takes you all the way up to that figure here. I generally find that the ideal number of subjects in a frame for multiple subjects is 3. It's kind of like the, you know, even in folklore, there's the 3 little
Pigs.
the 3 wise, the 3
Amigos.
the 3 amigos. Oh, the 3 amigos. Quavo, Offset, and Takeoff was the I don't know. Anyways, so I would actually think that continue to maybe shoot more of these kind of photos because you know, that thing's probably going to become like a Starbucks or something in the next few years. And I think, especially what's very unique about us being in a
House of Representatives.
Everybody's still not wrong.
KFC.
But I think, so this is one thing I just recommend everyone is that, so once again, I'm pro DC, boo New York. Now, I love both, but then the unique thing about being a DC street photographer is that New York street photographers don't have access to this kind of images. And rather than us trying to chase the same thing that like a New York City street photographer might do, perhaps maybe we should be shooting more like politicians or more around the Capitol building and stuff like that. So I think this is a very good example there. Yeah, nice stuff, man. Okay. So who's next? Whereas there's other photos that only look at as big images and that they don't look well as small thumbnails. So once again, the small thumbnail test means even when I'm looking at my photos in Lightroom, let's say I import all my photos from my SD card, I'm scrolling through Lightroom, I purposely, intentionally try to keep them as small thumbnails, or even when you're looking then through your phone. All right? So before I even blow it up, right, it's a good practice for us to judge images as small thumbnails. So what do you guys like about the top middle image?
It's clean.
It's clean. It's also, I mean, their eyes, so
Yeah.
it's going to grab your attention, and it's also looking directly at the viewer, so it's engaging the viewer. It's pretty hard not to do.
It's room for imagination as well.
I like that you see the back of her head and then you see the front of somebody's face. So
But
it's like
also-
a mirror.
Wait, but if you're gonna say that you like something, I like that, but why? I don't want to get into this, reoccurring thing where you're like, I like this, I like that. Back it up. So, what's the reason?
Okay, boss.
I like it. I like it because I think Vinny said because it's like a mirror and there's like a contrast there. And to me, it's like if I was taking that picture, it shows that he waited for somebody to walk down those stairs so that you get the back of their head and also the eyes and the picture.
Well, she's actually he or she. They're sitting. I like the engagement between the subject matter and the eyes. Right. The hair matches the tree.
Right.
But also the tree functions as her hair. Her hair.
Yeah. So that I think that's where the joy of the image is.
Right. So
and the lines, the geometry is kind of like pointing towards the eyes.
So this is where things get like fun. So in the Mac, I like to use this little mode here. Sometimes even it's a good exercise to make the photo really tiny, itty bitty to better judge the composition. So we can see it bigger here, right? But let's say you're looking up there, right? So that's almost akin to just squinting at the image. What part of the frame has a strong figure to ground, or which is really obvious to see? The eyes, right? What's difficult to see or make out?
The stuff behind, the things on the side.
The things on the side.
Yeah.
And also for me, it's a little bit hard to see the women too, right?
Yeah.
So now let's do some image diagnostics, right? Let's say Vinny shot, or any of us shot another scene like this similar in the future. How could we make this to increase the figure to ground, or to increase the contrast, or to increase the visibility?
Bend.
Yeah, lower and closer.
Okay, so what would happen if you get lower and closer?
They'd be side by side visually. You would have a figure on the left with the hair above, and if you got low enough, close enough.
All right, can you come up? Come up.
Okay, sure.
Stand up. Point to what you're talking about.
If I saw this scene and I felt like photographing it, I would get as close right here so that the left side of my image was this figure with hair which would hopefully be separated from all of this light in the background. And they would be side by side with the eyes. And if that was the goal, was to show the similarities between the two, I would juxtapose them right side by side. Because I don't care about the street, and I don't care about cars in the background.
Yeah.
And if I shot it this way, I would probably take a step left and have no negative space over there.
I'm just thinking that the woman needs to be in the dark spot with the gates.
So put the woman in the dark spot.
You can also put the back of the woman's head, so it's situated, how do I do this? Right here. So the eyes are around on each side.
Oh, that'd be a good idea. Oh, I like that idea.
That does mean you're getting a lot closer.
Yeah, I do like that idea too, because right now, if I took this image, let's say this is the photo, right? And if I put it on a scale, which way do you think the photo leans?
Left.
Leans a little bit left, right? If we wanted to balance a little bit more, so either two things.
You need to go over more.
You either want to move a little bit, or if you wanted another person somewhere on this way to counterbalance the frame, or I like the idea pay her $5 to stand here, or if you're just patient enough, because where this is, you could keep revisiting, which is kind of fun. Even one of my friends, he gave me a tip that let's say I was shooting street photography, and then you see a really good scene and you want to revisit it. In Google Maps, just push and hold the screen, and then you could drop a pin to where that spot is, and then you could revisit it. So ideally, maybe even if you're having a person there, or even another tip too to simplify the scene, shoot a vertical orientation to simplify the scene. I think there's what's your guys' second favorite photo?
The box chest players.
Which one is it?
Chest player.
Top right.
Yeah.
Top right? Okay. So what do you guys like about this one?
Just one composition.
Yeah, I think the tree provides a very strong element.
Yeah, there's two people on each
What's
side, and it's
I mean, the layers.
It's grounding.
Two people on the back.
All right, come up. Point out all the layers. Point out all the layers. Yeah. I'm the nicest bossy guy ever.
She met her match.
Yeah.
yeah, in the layers. It's kind of interesting.
I actually really do like how this dude back here is totally white against the black background. So that's like the maximum figure to ground contrast, which works really well. And also one thing that I think is kind of nice to consider is, so if you think about a scene like a three-dimensional thing, so the woman standing here is kind of facing this way into the frame. There's a guy here facing that way into the frame. There's two guys sitting, looking at each other this way. There's a guy back there. So like, whenever you're making a photo, if you make a street photo where people are either at different distances but also facing different ways, it makes the photo more dynamic. So I think that's also another way to determine what makes a good street photograph, is the more dynamic it is. Any suggestions you guys have to like maybe simplify the scene or to improve it?
Why did you include that shuttle bus?
Just showed up there. It wasn't planned. Like I made a composition and.
How many shots did you take?
Just one. It was film.
Hey, don't say that.
Oh,
I shoot like 8 frames in one.
Yeah. Oh, so this is actually a good scene, a good tip. So I attended a Magnum workshop maybe like a few years ago. Shout out to Cindy for having me apply. This is one, I mean, you don't have to follow this tip, but this is a good pro tip, especially if you shoot film or digital, whatever, it doesn't matter. Be picky about what you photograph. So don't take 1 or 2 photos of everything. Be patient, and when you find a good scene, shoot the shit out of it. So even for myself, when I shoot film, I might walk around all day and not see anything interesting, but if I find one scene that's interesting, I'll shoot 36 photos of just the same scene and try to make the one perfect scene. There's actually a good story. Do you know the photographer Alex Webb? Have you seen his barbershop picture with all the layers and stuff like that? So there's a picture he shot in Istanbul, and he's shooting Kodachrome film. Guess how many photos he shot to make that image? He shot 360 photos on film to get one shot. Do you know how many rolls of film that is? 10 rolls of film for one scene. So he saw the scene like something that's like this, right? And he just kept clicking and kept working the scene and kept reloading his thing to get that one perfect shot. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I had from the Magnum workshop with Konstantin Manos and David Allen Harvey, is that the difference between a mediocre photographer and a great photographer is that a great photographer will take like 300 photos of the same scene to make the best possible image with the, because I mean obviously none of us are dragonflies, we cannot see every single thing that's happening in the frame, but what we could do is we could let our insatiability for perfection drive us in a positive way to keep clicking. And especially if you're shooting with your phone or digital, there's really no downside. So I think when in doubt, just shoot more photos, right?
It was actually the last shot of my roll.
Oh, okay, so that's still pretty good, yeah.
Question. I'm not a photographer or visual artist at all, but the last pic, can you go back to that one, the first one?
This one?
Yeah. Does anybody, maybe I'm tripping.
Yep.
Does anybody see, okay, you see the eyes, the 2 lights, to me serve as like the nostrils of the nose. And then the gate was almost like a mouth. Does anybody see that?
I see it now. Oh, yeah. Oh, the 2 lights here are nostrils, and then the...
Yeah, like some of those and nostrils. They look like tears to me. Yeah.
Tear.
Oh, I like that interpretation.
Yeah.
So this is actually why I like to hang out with other people, not just photographers, because your vision as also like a sound artist too, I think actually adds a lot of deep insight, something that us photographers often wouldn't see. Yeah, so like looking at the other shots, so this scene here is pretty interesting, but once again, what's that phrase we learned? Figure to ground. So the figure to ground, so a good way to talk about images, usually a figure to ground is either strong or weak. So I think here the figure to ground is a bit weak. So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening. So when you blow it up, it's a little bit difficult to tell. Here on the bottom left corner, I think it's quite very strong figure to ground. Is that even as a small thumbnail, you could kind of take apart everything. Top left, I would actually say the image has a little bit weak figure to ground because there's a little bit too much happening. That's my favorite. Right. So Ryan, why is that your favorite?
because the figure to ground ratio. I like that there is some parallelisms between the guys both having their feet up. You know, obviously you can tell that there is some, like, I guess, either, you know, they're dressed very differently, but there's some obvious camaraderie or, you know, friendship right there. And on top of that, I like the guy in the back. You know, I wish someone was maybe, like, you know, crossing their arms like him, but maybe something happened in that left window in the whatever, I guess the liquor store.
The GNC.
GNC.
So it's on L Street, right?
Yeah.
Connecticut, no, I know exactly where it is.
So one tip I like to do too, I know you can do this on the Mac now, but you can do this on your iPhone as well, is taking screenshots of the images and then using that as drawing on top of the images to draw what you see and what you like. And actually Henri Cartier-Bresson, or Michael Jordan, godfather of street photography, he would often do this. He would print out his contact sheets, which are the small thumbnails of his images, and he'd take out tracing paper, put tracing paper over his images, and he would take a pen or pencil and sketch on top of his images. So what I really like about the photo is, usually when you look at photographs, the direction where people look, it's like an arrow or a vector, and the more different dynamic vectors, oops, it's got a little crooked nose, the more dynamic vectors you could get in a photograph, I think once again it just kind of makes it more easier. So obviously Mac needs to work out their tools here, but yeah, like even this thing here, and also like you could see there's so many different points of interest throughout the frame, and even subtle things like that there, that there, and I mean some people might ask like, okay, honestly, who's gonna see this and
you see subconscious,
yeah, the doubles too, right? And even like, once again, if we just abstract these things, they become like little, you know, arrows or elbows and stuff like that. And yeah, I think once again, it's I liken street photography to kind of like human sculpture or art. So I think this is probably, my opinion, your most successful image. And yeah, like it's a technique that I recommend all of us to try. Right? That's stuff.
Side of the picture, it's just like it's in the center, and it's just too much.
You think taking up this space, taking up this space is successful?
Yeah, because then it would be weird. And
big highlights that doesn't have any detail in it. It's just blurred.
It's an incredible.
So Tom, why'd you say you like it?
Well, the flow and highlights are obviously a problem, but you can, I presumably could be taken care of. I like the story. The kid's hands coming down to sadistically torment. This poor bird. And there's interesting visual elements on the side. You've got the elaborate tree on the right, and another bird, and Davis Hark on the left, and the lights up to a very believable scene.
Yeah,
I think I've changed my mind. The hand is amazing.
Which end?
This one?
The left, his left hand is amazing. I mean, that detail is.
What if the hand like this? Story, it looks like he's trying to catch the bird.
Yeah. What if the hand's like this?
Yeah.
You gotta think about that, bro. That's the picture. This is like
both hands like
like if it was like that, then I would give it something. But
Or maybe you crawl in the corner.
And that distractions. So many distractions.
I know, right?
Yeah. So I feel like this is a tricky thing with images, because obviously, ultimately, whether a photo's good or not, it's all subjective, right? I think that there are certain elements of the thing that we all agree on that's interesting, like the boy being covered with a pigeon, which is like quite surreal, and it's also obviously very dynamic because there's a lot of movement. The thing that's tricky about this image is that it's also very like cluttered, and there's figure to ground wise, it's really difficult to decipher what's going on. So so I think that's what's very interesting about these critique sessions is that you as a photographer, it's like, our photos are like our babies, right? Like, you guys have any friends uploading photos of their babies and kids to Instagram and Facebook? And they're like, oh, my kid is so cute, but it's like, put it back in the oven, right? It's like, it's right? So like, every parent thinks that their kid is perfect and so beautiful, right? and trust me, like, I'm a sucker for this too, is that like, all my photos are so perfect and beautiful, because they're essentially children. So that's why it's nice for these critique sessions, for people to see what doesn't work well in your photos, but ultimately it's your decision as artist, whether you decide to keep the shot or essentially ditch the shot.
Can I just say, the reason I picked this picture is because I also felt like it was cluttered and overdone, but I also liked the cross in the middle, and that's why I picked it.
Yeah. So I think that's why it's tough, right? Like, you as an artist, you know what works, what doesn't work, and ultimately you decide whether you want to keep it or ditch it or share it or whatever. And just, it's just kind of useful to know that, like, you kind of know the landscape of what people's feedback is gonna be, and like, once again, it's more of a matter of courage, whether like, okay, I love this shot, I'm gonna stand with this shot, or you could be like, okay, maybe I could aspire to take a shot similar to this, but even better. What are your other guys' favorite shots?
I like the one top left.
Top left?
Yeah.
Alright. Why?
I love the baby's reaction. I like the fact that there's the background isn't like, it's a minimalist photo. It's not really any distractions. The subjects are well lit and the expressions are interesting.
Yeah. And she has a lot going on. I mean, she's holding on to that mug.
Is it just me, or does that, like, child's head, like, look disproportionately small? Right?
It's turned up and away from you, so it's, it's gonna.
Her face is small and her head is big. That's a small face.
My question with this picture is like whether it's ethical, because after I took it and I looked at it closer, I was like, maybe that kid has like some kind of disability or something.
Oh, okay.
Well, why did you take the photo?
Because I like the lighting.
Was it about the light?
Yeah, you're not trying to exploit them. Yeah.
Or even a question too is that like, should nobody ever photograph kids with Down syndrome or?
I think that's the answer.
Yeah.
Wait, should they? Well,
They should be able to.
Yeah.
Everyone and everything should be able to.
avoid it.
Yeah.
I mean, but like homeless people, you wouldn't photograph them a lot of times, I would say. Probably 99 out of 100 times, I will not take that photograph. But there's always exceptions to every single rule.
Yeah. Well, one thing, so let me also ask another leading question. So, what do you guys think about the negative space on the left?
Doesn't bother.
I think it's okay, but I wish like you had positioned yourself more like in front of them. I think that it would be stronger. Maybe that was the way that the light was hitting the people, and then you didn't have a lot of room to move around. But I feel like as street photographers, taking pictures of people is very anxiety provoking. So sometimes we stay on the side. When I think that the strongest pictures are when you're like right there in front of them.
Alright. So I'll make a case why I think this is actually a very, very interesting composition and why I actually really like it. So have you guys ever heard this thing called like Fibonacci spiral or golden triangle or Illuminati?
Yes.
So essentially the basic idea is this. So if you guys want a very useful, fun compositional tool, this is called the golden triangle. Essentially, you just draw a diagonal that goes through one corner to the other, and then you draw another line that goes perpendicular through it. And essentially what you're trying to do is you're creating a 90-degree, you guys remember geometry class, right? Like 90 degree. I mean, this is not perfect because I'm not a wizard, but essentially the basic idea is that your eyes generally tend to gravitate to this part of the frame in terms of trying to create a dynamic image. And also, I know some people, like, even if you wanted to abstract this, like, they do that Fibonacci spiral thing. Trust me, I'm not very good. I actually had to do this in Lightroom. But essentially, the reason why this is very interesting to me is that I think what we're trying to do, once again, with photography and images, make more dynamic images. And I personally love all the negative space because by having negative space, it allows more dynamism because the viewer almost has the anticipation that they're going to move into that negative space. So there's more potential energy. The photo feels more kinetic.
Honestly, I think without that negative space, you don't have the tension.
Yeah.
And that's like a really critical element to this photo.
And if, I was gonna say, if she was standing completely vertically, it wouldn't be as strong, but she's leaning into the negative space, which takes you
But
through.
she's also engaging the photographer, which kind of makes a big difference. Otherwise, I don't think that it would work.
I guess going back to, well, in terms of movement and then the kinetic energy, and going back to her comment about shifting over to take the photo head on. This photo works because her hands are full. She's a mom. She's constantly moving. So, like Eric said, leaving that negative space there's space for her to move into. Now, if she was on the other side of the frame, it wouldn't work as well.
Right.
And the fact that she's angled means that she's in motion.
Right.
Her day is busy. Hands are full. She's got to run to practice this piano lesson, blah, blah, blah. That's why this photo works from this angle.
And the shadows also kind of let you know that things are happening, people are moving. It gives motion. Yeah, it gives motion.
Shifting it head on would just be a portrait, and I feel like you lose so much of that.
I agree.
That momentum that this photo had.
Is there another person holding the child? Is that another hand?
No, that's her hand.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
Wait, there's another hand.
That is
wow. Anatomically, this is a
That's not holding the baby. It's not holding the baby.
Oh my God, yeah.
What the?
She's a fake. She's a fake.
I take back everything I
She holds it.
said.
She's holding
It's like an octopus.
A hand, a baby hand, a hand.
That is a
I've
That's
looked at
a man.
this picture for
That's
hours.
a
man hand.
That's exactly.
That is a man hand.
And the sun just hit the baby's eyes. She came out of the shadow. That's it.
Oh, that's not even
That's
real.
crazy because she's not the one.
It's a big Jeff Disney thing on it.
Nothing is real.
Alright, all the photographs are
Because
lies.
there's another shadow.
Right.
There's another shadow of somebody
Yeah.
else in the background.
One tip also, this is one thing I learned about composition.
Who found that?
Is I think one thing to think about is the proportion of your subjects taking up the frame versus the negative space. So if I just added like this magenta blob, so we might see this in an art museum, right? Something like that. Right? So, right, we see stuff like this, yeah, it's great, right? But what I like about it is in terms of proportion of that shape against the black, it's good like balance, I think, in terms of the proportion of that versus that. So to me, this photo works well from a compositional perspective. Do you guys use Lightroom to look at your photos? So I just want to show you guys one fun little tip. In Lightroom.
There's like 1,000 of them.
Yeah. So if you want to just look at a photograph, let's say I'm looking at this in Lightroom. This is a good way to look at the overlay tip. Is under develop, hotkey for develop is D. And then you go to the crop tool, and the hotkey for crop is R. And by default, it's the row of thirds, right?
You're hitting O.
And yeah, if you press O, it changes the orientation of the crop overlay. And so you could kind of go through all these different things. So this one is the golden triangle, the one I showed you earlier. And this is another pro tip. While holding Shift, press O. And then this will shift the orientation of the thing. So according to the golden triangle, this is positioned very well. Or if you keep scrolling through this is the Fibonacci spiral. And by pressing Shift and O, you can put it to different parts of the frame. So obviously this is the best one. Yeah, so I think from like these quote mathematical principles, the composition I think works very well. But ultimately for me, what I like about the shot, because ultimately the subject matter and the soul of a photo is more important than the composition. And yeah, I think this relationship between the mom and the daughter is really powerful. Yeah, good stuff, man. If you have people, this is our tip too, if you have people turning around or moving their neck, it actually makes it more dynamic. The tip is look at the neck fat. Good neck fat.
You want the neck fat.
Yeah.
I like how it's like 3 different versions of the same person. Like they all look like white men, but they all look like different kinds of white men. Like you have.
Oh wait, what about this? What about this? He's like,
ooh.
Get off the thing.
I
like the pic. I like the thing.
You know what's crazy about this image is we completely throw the horizon rules out the window, right? Because it's slanted like a winogrand, and it's purposeful.
I think, you know why I appreciate this image? Because I think the first thing I would have thought is like, I got to get that America great again. Like that's the center thing.
That's like what drove my route.
Yeah, but the fact that you didn't really make that the main component, but just an element. Yeah.
But it's more suggestive, and it says Erica again.
I actually just saw the gesture. I just saw the gesture, which is really strong.
Well, one thing that I think is cool is, you know, the repeating patterns of the American flag here? It mirrors this here, it mirrors in the wall here.
Yeah.
Brian, this is like the best picture you've ever made.
Do you know what's also
you
kind
could
of...
be tired.
You could be tired.
And on a high note. And on a high note.
Visually too is very interesting. Each of them only have one eye.
Yeah. Good.
Very dynamic.
You shot it from the chest though. So
So this one's great. This is, so how does it, sometimes when you look at photos, a question you gotta ask yourself is, how does it make you feel? So when you guys look at this photo, how does it make you feel?
Longing. Looking at the future.
If you guys want to see
kind
the...
of sense of frustration or concern or something. Which is also very strong. Like a very,
Yeah. What colors do you see? Main colors.
red and blue.
And how about the background?
Yeah.
So what are RGB?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that having the strong colors actually really make the shot so much more impactful, because I feel that shooting color is actually more, it's more tricky than shooting black and white, because the colors could either make or break the shot. And this is like maybe me thinking about it too much, but what color is the red and blue reminiscent of?
USC.
Flag.
Yeah. So like perhaps it could even, or like even if you think about the white and the black, it's like kind of the white and black of the white of the stars in the flag. So to me, this is like an interesting, maybe like commentary on American politics in terms of race and equality, or because like I look at her, she looks kind of like working class. You know, there's that picture of the lady with the black lady with the mop, or the broom. Do you guys know that picture?
Gordon Parks. Yeah.
The Gordon Parks picture?
Yeah.
It really evokes it. So I think this one and the first one are really great shots. Ryan, which one do you like better? This one or this one?
The first.
What's your personal favorite? Because they're both great. I think they're kind of two different shots though, you know what I mean? Like,
They're very different, and they're from two different times. You know, I mean, obviously, but you know, this shot is from maybe like 3 days ago or 4 days ago.
Just digital.
And this is Baltimore, of course. This is Porsche Harbor.
So I think,
2015 was that one, and then 2019.
So this is also the tough thing too, is that like, I think both are strong shots, but because visually, the film versus the digital, they just look so different that like it's going to be difficult for you to put these photos next to each other.
Yeah, they're not
in the same.
Just the film one is the one that was submitted.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The lens.
But I actually think this is the better shot in terms of like, it's
complex.
Yeah, I think it's more complex in a good way, and also like usually this is a nice thing. This is just a tip for everyone too. We generally photograph the working class or the slightly more impoverished. You don't see enough fancy people in suits in photos and street photos too. So essentially we should shoot more suits, but yeah, really strong stuff, right?